because at least that'll give some time for at least some people to join.
Yeah.
Um, so today we have returning friend Darius from Lifeline Reptiles and
What's
his
going on?
brother. You said brother-in-law, right?
Yeah, brother-in-law.
Carter, who's learning how to work with venomous snakes. Is this your first time working with them today?
Not my first time working with him. I'm kind of helping Darius here and there when I get a chance. But
Uh,
today was like I got to handle a couple of them, and he was showing me, how to actually do it properly, and all that.
nice.
So doing it for a minute.
That's awesome.
He's learning the techniques and kind of the different, even with non-venomous snakes, just how to read the body languages and exactly what they're thinking and what their next move's going to be.
Mm. Well, it looks like there's 4 people in here. I'm trying to get it on my phone. Somehow I'm able to do that, so I can add moderators like from friends if they join. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll try again in a bit. Um,
What I do is I pull it up on the laptop just so I can see. I don't know if it works the same way on your side, but maybe you'll be able to work it from your computer. Or are you using your computer right now for the video, right? For the
yeah,
webcam. Yeah.
I think I figured it out. So today we're going to talk about Venom. Y'all love Venom, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, so Venom, what is it? It's modified saliva, and it's used for many different things. Many animals have evolved venom. Um, what types of things, Darius, is venom used for? Jess, what's going on?
So as far as the animals themselves go, it's primarily actually a digestive more than anything. They can utilize it in a defensive manner, but for the most part, it's used to digest, break down, and be able to utilize food.
Mm-hmm. So, like other animals too, when you think about defensive venoms, we'll talk about a certain snake that does use it for defense, but things like bees, um, and then competitor for competition, platypus males using their venom for uh, against each other, males, and then prey capture with snakes. Aaron, what's going on? Thanks for being here, everyone. Um, yeah, I gotta try to stay focused. Anyways, what other, like, what all would you like to talk about?
I guess basically just kind of the all around usage of it, how it's evolved over time. Just like I mean, most lizards are now coming out, monitors, lizards, different things like that are coming out that they all still carry some sort of prehistoric uh, venom that's residual inside of their saliva that comes
Mm,
from back when they actually needed it and utilized it in different manners, and that evolves throughout time. So from back then to now, and then in 20 years, it'll all be different. Just the same as the locality can make a variation in the same snake's venom can be different depending on where they're sitting at and what they're doing, and it's all to benefit themselves inside of the ecosystem that they reside in.
exactly. Now, you brought up a few good things. Now, you know how they believe snakes evolved from venomous lizards, and there is a guy. Um, he's like the number one venom dude, and he works in Australia. I can't remember Brian Fry. Have you heard of Brian Fry?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
So when they do like forensic level tests on even pythons, like you mentioned about the lizards, they're still minuscule. You can still detect venom because he talks about like evolution being like a crime scene. That even though it's not in use, you can still detect it at these small levels. If
Oh
that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. You can
And
still find in very small, even some that are so far away from that still have such a small residual amount, and that alone teaches a lot about their background, where they come from, what they used to eat. I mean, it says a lot uh, about their evolution.
mm-hmm. And even that stuff, since it's so far removed, like Darius was saying, evolution happens quick with venom, very quick. So when you're studying these animals that you wouldn't expect, there's lots of medical benefits that can come from that. Now, Jess asks, does venom work on pre-killed animals as well as it does live animals?
Yeah,
If they're
I would say.
pre-killed, or go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I would say as far as the digestive aspect of it, yeah, I would say it works just as well. As far as breaking down the body and everything.
Mm. Yeah, Jess, the way I read it, I was picturing like, does it still kill the animal? It's like, well, if it's pre-killed, it's right.
Yeah.
Do you know, should we go over the difference of, well, first of all, how do you feel when you hear people say poisonous snake?
I mean, I think I think people generalize. For the most part, I think people generalize. They say poisonous, and they just think venom, poison, all that stuff kind of sits in the same realm. Um, I think it's just a lack of understanding exactly where it comes from. Um, but when I see it, if I see it on like in news articles and different things like that, I find it like disturbingly hilarious because if you're going to have articles discussing these animals, I mean, and I've seen it on pretty well-known broadcasting stations and situations, and it's like you should not be. It's one thing for an average person to say something like that because they may not know or might not be something they're involved in, but to be publicly discussing something on a platform that anyone can see it, if you're talking about venomous snakes and calling it poisonous, then it's immediate. Those cause a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lack of education too. It's not, it's people not understanding what they're actually talking about when they're talking about these animals.
Exactly, and it's not a big deal. Like especially online, it really bothers me when someone will say, "Is this animal poisonous?" and then somebody replies like, "It's venomous, not poisonous, idiot." Like,
Yeah,
you're just asking a question. Like you can
exactly. And I don't think it's anything anyone should be attacked for. When it comes to, like I said, when it comes to a person. People are going to they're going to be told what they're told by what is supposed to be like an educational board, an educational platform, whatever it is. And that's why I think it's problematic when it comes to like a big platform discussing it or a news article discussing it or what's supposed to be an educational study, because then that is what causes that misinformation. And then you have people who listen to it, they refer to it as poisonous or whatever it is, and then they get attacked by people. And it's like, no, if you know more, then you should be somebody who's educating that person, not attacking them for just learning from sources that they don't understand aren't correct.
Mm-hmm. And there's some very smart reptile people that still they use it interchangeably. But like I said about Brian Fry, if the number one dude that studies this stuff differentiates it in terms, then like I'll follow that.
Yeah.
So he mentions poison, very small molecules. That's why it can pass through skin. Venom, big molecules need a wound to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the evolution of the fangs, the hollow tips.
Oh yeah.
Now, what about are the rear fang venomous with the Duvenoris gland? I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Is that more primitive?
I would say it is. I don't know for a fact, so I can't say too much, but I believe it is more primitive. I think it's an evolutionary step to them getting rid of it and not needing it as much. For instance, with hognoses, like when you think of Western hognose snakes, I've noticed that you can get them to switch over to rodents for the most part, but I've had one that refused, never ate a mouse the entire time I had it. I was having to feed it frogs. It wouldn't even touch lizards, to be honest. And that's what they do. That's something that's an evolutionary thing where they are used to eating frogs and other like amphibians and small reptiles. And I think through evolution, that's going to change just because of their environment, where they're at, where they're located. It's more likely they're going to go towards maybe larger reptiles and eventually rodents. But even though that was a completely captive, born and bred hognose, it's evolution inside of it. It knew it wasn't supposed to eat rodents. It wasn't supposed to eat. It wanted frogs no matter what. And I think that's a good example to show that when you see rear fang snakes, I think it's just a stepping stone between becoming probably getting rid of it. To be honest, they're probably going to eventually not be that semi-venomous reptile.
Mhm. Yeah. So the front fang, that's what people think of when they hear venomous. The front hollow fangs that look like a hypodermic needle, highly modified, and the venom glands. But these rear fang snakes that we're talking about, it's sort of like a groove in the back, and that the venom kind of seeps out and drips down. I believe that there's not all of them have the groove. Have you heard that? I can't remember which species. I've read this long ago, so I don't remember. But I feel like some don't have that groove.
I think it does depend on the species. Like there's some like hog noses, you don't see it as much at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's much smaller. I think that's why if you compare it to like the mangroves, for instance, that are like a rear fang colubrid, you get bit by one of those, it's much more severe. Like you're more likely to have swelling, complications. Some people have had to go to the hospital, stuff like that. And I think if you look at them, they have much more of a predominant groove and teething as far as their fangs go. Whereas things like even like false water cobras and westerns, it almost seems like smaller rear fang teeth, less of a groove. It's more just kind of straight back, and it's not as effective.
So when we talk about rear fang snakes, the ones we're discussing, like mentioned, very mild swelling. There are snakes though, like the boom slang, that's rear fang, and was believed to be, I believe, back in the day, to be harmless because of that, and then realized how toxic they actually were. Have you heard that story about that herpetologist that was bit by boom slang and he journaled his death?
Whenever they finally realized how serious it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because they were considered a not very venomous rear fanged arboreal type of species, and nowadays getting bit by one of them is a pretty big deal. You don't want to get a boom slang. You don't want to get bit by a boom slang.
So you're not trying to get bit by one?
Oh, by far. Definitely don't want to.
We talked about the hognose snake. Their venom is prey specific, like amphibian specific. But the cool thing, and I think we touched on this before on our last live, snakes. So baby snakes, super tiny. Some, can't take the prey, the mammal type prey in their area, even if it's a baby mouse, for instance. So baby brown snakes may eat frogs and stuff, and their venom's different than the adults. But when they age and switch over to their mammal diet, their venom changes, and the anti-venom for brown snakes does not work for the babies. That stuff's so interesting. I think we talked about that before.
Yeah, brown snakes. There's a few snakes that their venom actually changes as they get older to adapt to different meals. I guess I would assume as babies they're more their predisposition for like amphibians and stuff like that. It's better for their growth, better for their bones, better for the muscle build. And then as they get older and need to eat bigger meals, their venom almost changes to be more adaptable for the rodents and larger prey items. And it's almost like a completely different venom. I mean, it basically is a completely different venom. So much so that you need a different anti-venom for a large one as opposed to a baby.
And it's easy. Snakes very easy to make the villain. People assume that just because a snake's venomous, it's out to bite them and hurt them. The venom's for them. Venom. There's a trade-off for evolution. If you're not getting your return back, then it's pointless. You can use that energy for other stuff. So venom's expensive to make. They're not going to waste it on people. They will if they have to, but wouldn't you say that these typical snakes, I'm not talking about spitting cobras, which we'll talk about later, venom's not great for defense. From snake venom's not great for defense by these terrestrial snakes that bite or use it for prey capture. I just stumbled all over my words. Hopefully you're able to follow.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, no, it's that a snake doesn't want to use. If you think most venomous snakes, not all, so it shouldn't be taken as a oh, okay, I have a chance to play with one and risk it. But realistically, most venomous snakes aren't striking with venom at first hand. Like rattlesnakes, for instance, most rattlesnakes, they're gonna rattle first, hope you go away, hope whatever it is goes away. Then they're going to strike, and it's going to be a dry bite, and they're going to hope that strike is going to be enough to get it away, and then they're going to utilize their venom for the most part. Not every time, but for the most part. And the idea is that they do that because of the amount of energy it takes in order to rebuild that collection of venom, because they have to produce that themselves. And if they use it all, you have to thank for being an animal that they have to use temperatures to maintain their food, to digest their food, to build. They have to have a certain amount of food to get to a point where they can have a healthy shed and regenerate from any damage that they've had. To use venom and the need to make it is extremely taxing. Like they're going to have to find somewhere to hide, wait, and in hopes to rebuild that venom collection so that by the time that there's a chance for food, they have a fighting chance.
And so, like, the reason I bring this up is, again, some venoms, like the bees and stuff, it's pretty instant that you feel the pain. But the snakes, I never been bit, so I don't know. But from what I hear, it takes a few minutes till you feel it. But that's just another thing to think about is what point is it to bite something? The pain comes 5 minutes later. That's enough time for them to get consumed and eaten. And just like Darius said, this isn't just because they're may dry bite doesn't mean that's always going to happen. They might unload on you the first time. So, like he said, don't just go mess around with snakes.
Yeah.
And about the energy thing, there's sea snakes, very toxic because they need to capture these fast moving fish. There's a sea snake that only eats fish eggs. That they don't need venom. Their venom glands are reduced, very tiny. So that's that trade-off. There's no use in having these big venom glands. They no longer need that. It's just amazing. And then I guess from here, if you want to direct the conversation to whatever, we'll just.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to speak on like locality differences, whenever you compare, I mean, you can have snakes like cobras, for instance, that are, and I think it should be kind of understood up front when you classify venom, such as like chemotoxic, neurotoxic, cytotoxic. Those I think are more. It's a generalized term for what the primary toxin is in the venom. Most even neurotoxic snakes still have cytotoxic effects. They have cardiotoxic effects. They can have hemotoxic effects. So it doesn't mean like, oh, I got bit by a cobra, so I'm not going to have to worry about localized damage. It's going to affect my neurosystem. Well, no, you are going to. There are going to be localized issues. There are going to be some even issues, but that's where the primary is going to sit. Is they have more of a neurotoxic effect. And same for like gaboons, they're cytotoxic, but they still affect the neurosystem. They still affect the heart, blood clotting, all that kind of stuff. And so up front, those are just generalized ways of speaking. But when you look at the locality difference, like for instance, you have like cobras that are in China, and then you have cobras that are in Africa. When you look at the difference in their venom, it's adaptable, and just like you're saying with spitting cobras, it's adaptable to what kind of predators are going to be around them, what kind of prey is going to be around them, where they're at, whether it's the rainforest, the desert. It's extremely it's extremely localized as far as the evolution and where it comes from, why it does what it does, and why the effects are the way it is. If you think about spitting cobras, for instance, being able to spit, that their venom is, monocled cobras are considered a spitting cobra, but they don't barely ever spit. Rarely ever happens. They don't need to. And when they do use it, it's almost nothing when you compare it to like a spitting, like something like a like black and white spitters or any of those kind, because their venom is used on. They have to worry about larger prey. For instance, like when you look at Africa, there's much larger predators that are coming up on them that they have to be defending, and that's why they have such a. Not only are they good aim, but they can spit, I think, up to 3 meters. I want to say, and hit something in the eyes and use that to ward off a larger predator that they know that they're not going to have a chance with. Whereas like in China, they're not worried about that as much. So in China, it's not as much of a necessity to be able to spit venom. So their venom isn't it hasn't been it hasn't evolved to a space where it needs it the same way they need it in Africa.
Like we mentioned about snakes using venom for prey capture, the spitting cobra and rink owls are the few that use it for defense, which is amazing that they can spit venom. And it's all about being able to get away from potential predator. I was always curious. You know how it can affect us, make us go blind if we don't wash it out right away. Does it actually blind an animal? I assume not, but I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know for sure. I would assume, considering that they have the evolutionary design to do so now, that majority of those animals probably have also evolved to have some sort of ability to go against it. But I would assume it's pretty effective. I think the burning and the pain alone, I would say it most likely doesn't cause them to go blind the same way it does for us, because we don't have to worry about getting spit in the face on a regular basis by a cobra. But the animals that are within their ecosystem that are regular predators of theirs, I would assume probably got some sort of evolutionary defense from it having major consequences. That being said, I think the biggest utilization of that for defense is the burning and the swelling, which I think probably is still very effective on large animals that they have to get away from.
Do you have a spitting cobra? I can't remember.
No, man. So my favorite, since I was a kid, my favorite snakes in the world were black and white spitters. Like I love spitting cobras, and I'd argue with myself on getting some. The only reason I haven't gotten any is mainly the buildup of allergens and whatnot, having to worry about building up an allergy, which is still kind of debatable on whether it's that big of a concern or not. But there has been some stuff that shows keeping spitters builds up. You have a chance of building up allergies from breathing it in, getting it on your skin, all that kind of stuff. And or if it obviously gets in your eyes or mouth or anything like that, and then therefore makes it more dangerous to deal with other venomous snakes, because you have more of a higher chance of going into a allergic reaction to it.
So that's a big problem with working with these animals is the allergic reaction. If you develop an allergy, that's the stuff that will kill you really quick. That's when you hear about people dying very quickly. Like anaphylactic shock.
Anaphylactic. Yeah. I want to say it was Dingo who has a bad allergy. Dingo Dinkelman.
Yeah.
He can't even be around it.
He keeps the spitting, but he got bit by a rear fang, like extremely no concern snake, I believe, down in South America, that caused him to go to the hospital and became a huge deal because he went into anaphylactic shock. And I want to say that was due to spitting cobras, working with them and being around them all the time. Yeah, but he's also been bit by other snakes too, so his chances of building allergies, I would say, are a lot higher than other people.
The way I see it, and I may be completely wrong, is I'd rather learn that through that than from being bit.
Yeah, that's a much better way to find out that that you got an allergy than getting bit by one. And I think your chances, when you look at it, for the most part now, being a fully healthy adult and getting bit by a venomous snake, your chances of actually having a fatal bite are pretty low with the medical advances that we have. Of course, you don't want it to happen, but if it happens, your chances are pretty low for it to be fatal. But if you go in anaphylactic shock, your chances are through the roof of a fatality. And that's where the biggest concern comes from. That's why my thing with spitters, like I love spitters, I'd love to keep some, but cleaning their cages, having it in the air, them spitting it, getting everywhere, I just don't, I don't want to play with it too much, play with the boundaries of making everything else risky for me. at the same time. So I might in the future get one, depending on, if I decide to let it go or not. But right now I'm fully on the idea that I don't want to, I don't want to worry about getting bit by my monocles because I've got spitters.
Yeah.
Which I like rainfalls or and I like they've got those orange and black rainfalls and whatnot, but I love the solid black rainfalls. Like I'd get some of those so fast. It's just the like I said, the worry of the anaphylaxis and all that.
So I'm gonna bring up something just to hopefully give everyone understanding, and then you can take it to the next whatever you'd like to talk about next. About the snake bite fatalities. The reason they're so high when you look at it worldwide is, again, Australia has the most venomous snakes, but like the United States, these are medical, great medical care. The chance of death very, very slight. It's like a 99% survival rate. But like in India, where the people that used to be snake charmers, they now collect snakes for anti-venom production, but they rely still on traditional medicine. So that's where all these fatalities are coming from. So even these people that are gathering the snakes for anti-venom, when they get bit, they still rely on traditional medicine, and it's just a cultural thing. And when you look at why these bites are happening at night, the bathrooms outside, they're walking outside at night, stepping on the snakes, and then again, the traditional medicine actually causes more problems. But it's a cultural thing. It's not. It's hard to convince people to change things, tradition, but that's the one thing that always gets brought up when I talk about snakes is, well, they kill so many people every year, but you got to look at what's behind that.
Yeah, I think people in general, and really not even just to venomous snakes, in general, people have a very bad understanding of the way that statistical analysis works. Because when you look at statistics are extremely specific. It's very based on one thing. It doesn't take into account all the details that are required to have a full understanding of what's going on. And so when you look at snake bites, for instance, if you look at like they do worldwide, like 100,000 or whatever it is of the amount of deaths. Well, they don't take into considering bites that happen in like indigenous, so areas with like indigenous people, local like Indian tribes, local groups like South America, for instance, the Fertile Ants. Um, uh, uh, these groups use those traditional medicines. They use things that have to do specific to them. And that's their culture and the way they do things. But the problem is whenever you look at something that is so, I mean, even for being like a society like we are, we have such a lack of understanding for venom. We only understand a few compounds of the hundreds of compounds that break down and make venom. And even world-renowned people are still studying it because it changes constantly. And so when you look at these statistics, they don't take in, like I said, traditional medication, the amount of people that are actually utilized in hospitals, and more common medication, indigenous groups. It varies so much as to who it is that is being bit, what they got bit by, where they got bit, how far away they are from medical help, if they're going to receive medical help. All those things change. When you look at it and you break it down more so to common medicine use by people that are adapted to our general society, the chance
You're kind of breaking up.
and lives within the culture.
Are you still there?
Yours kind of is breaking up now too.
Is
it better now?
Yeah. So
okay, I can see
the last part we did not hear.
Well, so basically what I was saying is that if you look into the specifics of the statistics that are based on people who use common medications that are in depth with our society, and the chances of fatalities are a lot lower, as opposed to somebody in South America that is a part of a tribal group that lives in their own culture and their own society, that doesn't utilize those kind of benefits. Their chances of death are way higher. So majority of those bites that go into account for those medication for or
I think you froze up again.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you.
All right.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, it cut off like the last part, but you're talking about utilizing or looking at all the statistics about people not utilizing modern medicine and things like that, and that comes into play with the fatalities.
Yeah, it varies different. It varies greatly statistically with people who use modern medicine and people who use traditional medicine. Um, so when you take into account the whole world, it's a very broad spectrum that is unrealistic for a common person.
Doesn't that more fall back to like the lack of education on it too? It just you give somebody such a big number, but nobody's looking where that big number is coming from or why is it that big? So nobody's actually asking those questions. Well, who's getting bit? Where are they getting bit? You know, things like that. I think that it's what it sounds like to me that it falls back to that lack of understanding or education.
Yeah, not the majority of people don't care to even look into that. They just hear it and go with it because it fits how they feel about snakes. But the thing is, venom saves more lives than they take. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, especially nowadays. The when you look at the amount of medicines that are being produced from looking at pain medications, diabetes medications, cancer treatments. There's multiple things that venom's used for that are extremely beneficial. And if you look at a generalized number of people, it's way more effective in a beneficial area than it is on a on the negative.
Like what it's the copperhead or not the copperhead, I guess the cottonmouth.
Primarily, it's for monocles.
But I mean, for that there's a cancer treatment.
The
copperheads.
Yeah. And then there's also, blood pressure medicine that it's one of the top 5 or 10 drugs of all time was derived from snake venom from, I believe, the fer-de-lance. It's one of the South American pit vipers, and that.
I want to say it is the fer-de-lance. Yeah, and that's one that's for that blood pressure works. Almost anybody who's diabetic is using that medication.
Yep. So that's a big thing that I don't even think people even realize. They probably don't even care, but it's just lots of medical advantages. Morbid. Did you see all those beautiful puppies? I'm assuming it's on your page. That's awesome, man. And thank you for being here. I guess you take it on to whatever you'd like.
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about medicines and whatnot, I mean, if you look at anything in science in general, if it affects the neurosystem, for instance, so like cobras and most, elapids in general, so anything that can affect the neurosystem in a bad way can affect it in a good way if done properly. If it's broken down, certain things are taken because those things are tied directly to the neurosystem. And so I know monocled cobras, I think, are probably one of the biggest right now as far as their venom is being produced on a regular basis and being studied on because it's going to be good for heart medications. It's going to be good for neurological issues, neurological damage, repairing the neurosystem, pretty much anything that has to do with the neurosystem, they're going to be able to produce a lot of medicines with.
And is it monocled cobra venom too that you were talking about pain medicine. Is that one of the? I believe it is. I know one of the
Yeah.
cobras, and I believe black mamba even.
Yeah, I was just watching something earlier that was saying that essentially like monocled cobras, black mambas, neuro effective venom can be used in place of it's 1,000 times stronger of a pain reliever without the addictive behaviors as most painkillers, morphine, hydrocodones, all that kind of stuff.
And instead of having to find needles to use for opiates, you can just use the snake fang and let it bite you and get high like that. I'm just messing around.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be an interesting situation.
Yeah.
There's venoms that will make you feel euphoric. Death adder venom. People that have been bit say it's euphoric. Some super painful. A lot of the, I believe, was it cytotoxic and hemotoxic, I'm sure, are very painful. But
yeah,
every time I talk about venom, you know, like Darius was saying about locality, I always bring up, because it's the most, I guess, well-studied one, the southern Pacific rattlesnake, how the ones out in the open desert, I don't know if it's desert, but open field, have the primarily hemotoxic venom. They can bite, release, and then track down the mouse. But the ones that are a few hours away, up in the rocky areas, have primarily neurotoxic venom, because they can't afford to bite the mouse and it run and hide, and they can't get to it. So it has to kill the prey quickly. And that's just one of the most well-studied ones. But it's just amazing how they adapt to their environment, just based on location. Just a few hour drive to a different environment, different venom, different venom.
Yeah, it's their venom is fairly similar to the green Mojaves. Green Mojaves are very they're neurotoxic and they're hemotoxic, and so depending on their location, it can vary as far as which one is more effective and which one isn't. The same as like green Mojaves are considered the most venomous rattlesnakes in the world, but that's also going to be location wise. Some of them aren't going to be as, it's always a bad bite from a green Mojave, but it's not going to be as bad as different localities. Some are going to utilize that neurotoxin much more than they're going to utilize that hemotoxin. And at the end of the day, a hemotoxic bite is way less concerning than a neurotoxic bite. But when you have both, you have something that can shut down the neurosystem, cause complications, breathing, muscular issues, and then you have something that's also keeping it from blood clotting and thinning and damage internally.
So Jess asked, is it true that COVID-19 comes from king cobra venom?
Yeah, I think that guy is a little nutty. The guy who was talking about all that.
Somebody was saying that?
It's a conspiracy.
There's a whole documentary on it that was talking about how he believes that snake venom is the cause of COVID-19. And then they're discussing how they think maybe snake venom will be able to help get rid of COVID-19. And it's a bunch of nonsense is what it is. But
they're trying to tie it to religion. And
they're not trying. What they're trying to do is they know people are scared of COVID. And so they're trying to throw that in there and be like, oh, snakes started COVID.
Yeah, if anything, snakes are the cure. Yeah. I mean, look at the medical symbol. Why is the snake on the medical symbol? Is it because they're healers?
I mean, if you look at it realistically, even in his history, snakes have been used for medical purposes since, thousands and thousands of years back in Egypt and everything. I mean, snake venom has had just as much to do with the medical world as it has to do with defensive or eating or anything that they utilize it for. People have been using that venom for a long time.
So I know venom is a scary thing, but we need to understand that snakes, they get this bad rep, but they have no reason to use this venom on us. And, the copperhead's super common. It's one of the I believe it may even be, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the least toxic of the pit vipers. But since,
I,
what's that?
I believe so.
Well, either way, their venom's not bad, but they're made to be believed that they're like these evil killers that are out just killing everybody. And it's
I know the way that they determine whether a snake is considered lethal or non-lethal is they base it off of the survival rate of somebody who hasn't gotten treatment. And I want to say copperheads come in at the lowest with being like 7%. So meaning that if you were majority of people who get bit by a copperhead and don't seek out medical attention are perfectly fine. There's only 7% of people, and that 7% is primarily made up of either very young children or people with immune deficiencies or the elderly that actually have fatal or a chance of fatality being bit by a copperhead. So yeah, I want to say copperheads are probably one of the least venomous. They're a non-true viper, but least venomous viper species that there is, like 7%. Whereas I want to say like a green Mojave, for instance, is close to 40% without medical attention, and then westerns and easterns and all that kind of sit somewhere in between there.
You're not referring to like the LD50, are you?
No. The LD50 is for the to determine the amount of the effectiveness of the venom, I believe, right? LD50 is for how toxic the venom is as opposed to other snakes.
So that's when you look up snake venoms, you'll see LD50. That means lethal dose 50. So and I believe they tested all on lab mice. So out of however many mice they tested on, however much, half of them die. But another thing that comes into play on that is it's tested on mice, and we talked about how venom can be specific for prey. Like king cobras primarily, they eat other snakes. So if you tested it with snakes, they're going to be the top of that list probably. And then these other snakes, like the inland taipan, may be low on that test.
Mm-hmm.
So these LD50, it's confusing. Did it go blurry for a second?
Yeah, for just a second it did. It's evened out now.
Good. So that's something that comes into play, is that they're tested on mice. And there's so much stuff that is a factor. And I'm confused by a lot of it. But like the gaboon viper, the venom technically isn't super toxic, but they have these massive venom glands and unleash so much into prey that is where the damage comes from.
Oh yeah. Even like king cobras, like gaboons and king cobras. We'll say gaboons have the biggest venom glands. King cobras come in second, and them two both. Like for instance, a king cobra is less toxic than a monocled cobra. But the problem with getting bit by a king cobra is they fill you with venom. So you have way more toxins going into the body. Whereas a monocled cobra, for instance, has more powerful toxins, but you're not getting as much venom into the system. So that's why a king cobra becomes so deadly. I think in general, that's why it's very hard to determine what snakes are the most dangerous, which ones are not. And I think that's why in general, they try to base it off of depths. Like a saw-scaled viper is nowhere near as venomous as most other snakes out there, but it kills so many people because of the general situation, whether it's people using traditional medicines or it's further away from medical attention. So it's considered one of the most dangerous snakes in the world. But in comparison to, a monocled cobra or other snakes, it doesn't have anywhere near the toxicity that snake does.
Mm-hmm. And there's snakes that have enlarged venom glands, like one of the coral snakes, I believe, in Asia. The gland goes down far down their body, very long, and then there's other snakes too. I should have probably looked all this stuff up. But anyways, these snakes burrow, which is probably has something to do with, maybe not. I can't remember what it is. But have you heard of
I know
that
what
snake?
I know what you're referring to. I can't remember what species it is. And I want to say that that's also one of the snakes that's considered poisonous, that it can actually collect poison and utilize it if it's eating poisonous, like amphibians, for instance.
Well, go ahead and talk
But
about that.
yeah, yeah, I want to say that that's the I want to say that's the same snake that you're referring to. I might be wrong, but I believe that that's the same one. And yeah, there's one of the few species, very few species that can do that.
What is it? You can you
I can't
explain
remember
it?
the name of it.
No, not that, but like the process. There are some
Oh,
snakes that
so
are venomous and poisonous, but how does that happen again?
yeah, so there's I want to say two or three species of snakes that are capable, if they're eating poisonous frogs or poisonous lizards, and they can actually collect that poison, and they hold it in the back behind their venom glands, and then they can use that poison so that if something bites them or tries to eat them or something, they can excrete it the same way as like the frogs that can do so, and they can use that poison as a defense mechanism, but they're only poisonous if they're eating poisonous amphibians. So if they're not eating other poisonous animals, then they're only venomous.
But isn't that amazing, everyone? So these snakes, there's a very good demonstration of how it's venomous and poisonous, but how it's using the poison for defense. Doesn't use venom for defense. It exposes its neck and tries to get whatever.
Mm.
I'll have to find this video, but it's showing you that it could bite and inject venom, but it's relying on those brightly colored neck pattern where the poison will be secreted. But it's just
Mm-hmm.
such an amazing thing. It's like the poison dart frogs that eat the poisonous insects, I believe, and gather
Mm-hmm.
the poison that way. But yeah, it's only if they eat that prey, they sequester that poison into these glands. So
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's an incredible example of just how evolution can work. I mean, everything around you, and I think it's the same even for humans. I think it's a slower process for humans, but what everything that's around you affects what you need to survive, your ability to do anything. And these animals have just shown an example of how what they're around will change the colors. It'll change the type of venom that they have, or the toxicity of it. It'll change the way they respond to certain situations, if they're going to be defensive, and use certain ways to be defensive. I mean, rattlesnakes, you even have things like copperheads that'll use their tails like a rattlesnake, even though they don't have rattles, but they'll do it to flicker around inside of foliage and leaves to mimic that same sound, to try to say, hey, stay away from me, you know. And those are all things of evolution. That's something that shows there could be a chance in many years that a copperhead might have a rattle on its tail, you know, because they're doing that same process that rattlesnakes had done to get to where they were. And that's why rattlesnakes are considered some of the most evolved snakes in existence.
See, the amazing thing about them is there's, I believe, two species that are on islands that no longer need the rattle, and
Mm-hmm.
they have little nubs for tail.
Yeah.
And it's just so awesome. And I've been trying to breed a cobra and a rattlesnake and make a cobrattlesnake.
That'd be an interesting one right there.
Yeah. It's just
Great.
I just there's so much stuff about snakes, and um, it's fascinating. I don't Yeah, it's just unexplainable. It's hard to follow some of it because, again, for me at least, when there's different information regarding something like venom specifically, you read one place or one textbook about venom, and then the next textbook will say something a little different, and then that throws me off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. People, I think, have there's such a fear based around snakes that I think people just kind of throw them in this general bucket of like, stay away from them, they're bad, they're evil. And then you have like the religious aspect where people just have this like idea that they're all these symbolic demons and all this crazy crap. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, snakes are probably some of the most interesting evolutionary examples that have ever existed. Like, when you look at what they've done, they evolve faster than most other animals. How different they can be. I mean, monocled cobras can have different venom depending on where they live. Some of them are way more dangerous than other ones, even though they're the exact same snake. And that alone just shows how much it can change from place to place, from time to time. They're a very extreme example of evolution and what evolution can do.
And we're playing an impact, like the cobras. When we build up these areas for people, and then we attract rodents, there's cobras that will specialize in eating mammals, and now that they're found close to people because it's easy prey source, and these are going to be over time a lot different than their jungle counterparts that are not experiencing the same thing. But not
I mean, look
every.
at how big they're getting now. Like the one that you've got is what, 7.5 feet?
What's that?
I said, look at how big they're getting even now. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the one you've got is 7.5 feet, isn't it?
dude, this one was. I thought my original, like the natural looking one, was big, but these two albinos, yeah, it's massive. I don't know how big, but ridiculous.
Yeah. I've seen some. I know somebody here that's got one that's like 7.5, and then lately I've been seeing a lot of monocled cobras that are big, and like that's not a large snake. I mean, monocled cobras were never supposed to really get over 6 feet at most, and nowadays you're seeing them 7, 8 feet, and that's all due to dietary examples. You know, that's a snake that eats rodents, more protein, more calcium, everything. I mean, that all changes. So, yeah, we might have some monster monocled cobras here in the next 20 years.
What's the one near you? The person, is it an albino one or is it a?
I want to say it is an albino.
See, when I posted that albino one the first time, people said, or someone commented that the biggest ones they've seen were albino, but I'd never heard that till I had this one. So
I've heard that example used, like as far as genetics changing with the morphs. Like for instance, I've always heard tiger reticulated pythons are much bigger than like wild type reticulated pythons. And I mean, I've seen some examples. It seems like tigers do typically tend to get bigger, but at the same time, snakes are more so prone to size when it comes to their environment and their food. But it is interesting how like you can see some different morphs seem to have different sizes and size capabilities than others.
mm. Now, what else would you like to bring up about Venom? This awesome Venom.
I guess cytotoxic venoms one to discuss. I think cytotoxic is probably about the nastiest thing in the world. I say it. I've said it many times. I mean, neurotoxic venom is way nastier as far as fatality wise than anything else. But cytotoxic is a nasty venom. That's a highly digestive venom. That's a venom that's made to break stuff down, deteriorate muscle, break down bones, and that's why when you look at things like puff adders and gaboons, man, I think I would take a bite from one of my cobras over my gaboon any day, to be honest.
Yeah, so cytotoxic is cell destroying, right?
Yeah, so it breaks down everything. It's destroys everything as far as skin, muscle, bone, breaks down cells, thins blood, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jess. Henrique, am I pronouncing this right, Darius? Henrique?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I love him. He's shown support, shared some of my videos. He has a big following. I appreciate
Awesome.
you. Cytotoxic is, yeah, gaboons have cytotoxic venom, don't they?
Yeah, so gaboons and puff adders are good examples of primarily cytotoxic, which is interesting because if you look at like the rhino vipers are hemotoxic. They're primarily hemotoxic, even though they're all cousins. But puff adders are considered more dangerous than gaboons are, outside of the fact that they're more likely to bite, but their venom itself is considered more dangerous. And yet the gaboon bite has way more cytotoxin inside of it. So I would say gaboons are probably, as far as cytotoxic venom goes, gaboons have the worst cytotoxic venom, but it's not as detrimental to the system as like a puff adder, for instance.
Look, this is, we've been all over the place, so hopefully people are able to follow and learn. But when we're talking about hypersensitivity, like developing an allergic reaction, people also do what's called self-immunization, which is where they, what the heck's the term? They they'll extract venom, dilute however much, and they inject venom to build up an immunity. So, but it can go either way. And Bill Haas, which is one of the biggest people that did it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is similar to how they develop anti-venom, right?
Yeah. So I've watched some of those, man. I think that is an interesting thing. People doing that. I'd never in my life would I do it. I think it's pretty insane. It's done a lot medically. But yeah, they take that venom and then they dilute it down and use a really small amount and start introducing it to the system. And then they change that mixture, a little bit more venom, a little less water. And then you get all the way to that. I can't remember his name, but there's that one guy who now just lets them bite them. And that stuff is just wild to me. I mean, it's interesting because it's done a lot as far as studies go. But I think I wouldn't recommend to anybody trying to do that or trying to be the next person to introduce venom into their system, because even looking at some of them as they get older, you can see the detrimental effect it's had on their like physical being, even just through watching it. I mean, it's, if that's their passion, by all means, I'm not here to tell nobody that they shouldn't do something with themselves. But I think as far as medically, you are a test subject when you do that stuff, even if you're the one making yourself a test subject.
You're playing a risky game.
Yeah, I understand it for the people that extract venom because they're most likely gonna get bit. That's you're pinning a snake down. It's trying to defend itself. I would say, guaranteed to get bite. But yeah, I don't care what people do. But I would say I feel like the opposite of what you said. For some of them still look very young, even though they're old. I'm so.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like it could be very it all could vary person to person too. Like I think it's different for everybody because everybody's affected differently as far as their immune system and their abilities. Man, I don't know. It's like I said, I think it is doing good. I think there is good that's going to come out of it. I feel like there should be a much better way of figuring it out.
Yeah. But again, who cares what someone else decides to do?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not judging. That's my way. I wouldn't do it personally, but everybody makes their mark different, so live it out.
So like with anti-venom production, this is something I don't know much about, but I believe they do the same thing, introduce small amounts to cows or horses, whatever it is. I think it's horses. And then
I know they do horses. I've heard about sheep. I believe crowfab they do it with sheep.
Because less people might be allergic to sheep.
Possibly. I'm by all accounts not positive, but I know that sheep do have something to do with the production is here in America. And I want to say I know horses, I believe sheep, and then cow. It's essentially they're using it to see the effects coming back as far as it going into the bloodstream, and then utilizing the way it affects the blood to create whatever it is that's going to balance it out.
Mm-hmm. So like the building up of antibodies and stuff, which is, I want to do a video on, someone asked me a few months ago my thoughts on self-immunization, but what I wanted to do is talk about how anti-venom's produced and all that. So that's something I'm definitely going to get to eventually. but it's still very interesting. But yeah, self-immunization is not something I would do.
Yeah, I want a lot of money. If someone wants me to do it, I want a lot of money. My family needs to be good if I don't make it.
Your first dose is the end of it all.
Yeah, I'd be mad if that was the case.
Now let me grab something real quick to show everybody. One second, all right? So we talk about Venom and them needing a way to introduce Venom. So, people talk about defanged snakes. These fangs are constantly being replaced. So usually there's backups ready to go. Sometimes you'll see two fangs, like if a snake's yawning or whatever, you can see two fangs in place, and that's the new one behind the old one. So I don't even know if it technically is possible to defang a snake since they're constantly replacing. But that's what these are. These are all the old fangs. I don't even know if you can even see it.
Yeah,
But
that's awesome.
Usually passes out in the poop. Dig through the poop and find fangs.
Yeah, I know that. That's another big concern, and I personally I need to start wearing gloves when I'm cleaning out gloves or a scooper or something, because I've heard a lot about how they can still there could be residual venom inside of that fang, and then you grab it, especially if it just came out, or say it broke off during like a feeding or something like that. Grab it, and then you get envenomated from that broken fang catching your hand. And so I'm actually probably gonna just start scooping it out. It'd be a lot easier than getting a napkin and trying to grab it up.
Yeah, I personally just grab it, but yeah, I've heard of people getting residual. I just, if that's how I go, then that's how I go.
Yeah.
So Jess, the spitting cobra, these are all viper fangs. The cobra fangs, very short and fixed. So I had a 14-foot king cobra fang. It was probably like this big, tiny, compared to this is probably from a 3-foot, 4-foot rattlesnake. So the cobra fang's super tiny, Jess. So I don't even search for them. But that is something I hear when I post the cobra's eating is clearly defanged, because what's it called? The membrane is covering the fang. You can't really see it.
Yeah, it's like a sheath almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever kept king cobras, or I've seen pictures and whatnot of you handling them? Have you kept them, or is that just one that you've worked with?
Yeah, it's one at my job. I just have no interest just because of the space.
Yeah.
And finding snakes to feed it. I know that people feed them rodents sometimes, but they don't live as long, I believe.
Yeah, it's harder on their system too. It's just not something that I don't think it provides as much nutrition to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, that's two I haven't handled is mambas and kings. That's those are two. Now black mambas are one I'd like to one day, but that's a far stretch from here. I won't get any until I have a separate space to keep them in.
Would you ever keep king cobras?
What was that?
Would you ever keep king cobras?
I mean, I would, but that to me, that's kind of more of a moral standpoint for me. Like I've thought about getting, because I like the Malaysians and whatnot. They're just such a not only are they so big, but they cover so much ground that I don't think it's very. It's not that it's not good, but I don't think it's very easy to keep a king cobra properly and give it what it needs in a captive situation unless you have a zoo or some sort of a space that you can really devote to them. Because a king cobra covers a lot of area. It hunts a lot of food. It climbs. It's on the ground, and then can get potentially up to 17, 18 feet in the wild. So it's kind of like, it's almost kind of like retics, keeping retics. I kept retics for a long time. I've had some that were, I think the biggest retic I've ever had was 15, 16 feet. And for the most part, they do a lot of laying up, but in the wild, they do a lot of climbing, they move, they hunt. So when you start dealing with real large species like that, I think it's hard to morally justify keeping in a smaller enclosure, which to them, an 8-foot enclosure is a small enclosure. I think if you do it right, you can. I'd like to keep a king, but I think that it'll more so depend on if I get to a point where I have a situation where I'm keeping them in a separate little facility on my property or whatever it is, and can devote, a good 15 feet of space to them.
That is your goal, right? To get a facility.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to. I have 10 acres that I could devote to it. But at the same time, I'd also probably, where it's at is really far out there. And if I was to do anything where I wanted to have it be an educational situation, I'd need it to be a little bit more to where people could get to it. But yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to have something, even if I was only using it online for education. That's right now what I'm doing is essentially primarily educational stuff is my goal. So yeah, I mean, depending on where it can go and how much, how many people start paying attention to what I'm doing. Yeah, that's definitely a goal of mine, is to have a physical place that I can have people come to and see, do breeding, get involved in different showings and shows, all that kind of stuff.
Now, do you have any other topics around Venom you'd like to bring up? And if anyone has any questions at all, feel free to ask. But yeah, did you have any other things you want to touch on Venom?
Man, I think for the most part we've covered most of the Venom. Cytotoxic being primarily digestive, neurotoxic having more defensive effect on it, evolution. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of the Venom grounds, at least the basis of it anyways.
So it's very complex, but very fascinating, and lots of medical significance with Venom. And even venomous primate. Did you all know that? The slow loris. It's just so amazing.
Yeah, the slow loris, man. That's one a lot of people have been keeping, they were keeping. I think it's been slowed down more. That's adorable animal, but just not an animal that's good for captivity. But yeah, they're venomous primate.
I believe. Have you heard of David Speed?
Yeah, I know him.
I think he saw one recently while out herping. Found
Yeah.
a slow loris.
Yeah, man, that guy is all over the place. Anytime I don't watch him regularly, but occasionally I'll come across one of his videos, and he'll be in some random spot, and I'm just like, dang, man, you do a lot. He seems like he's traveling every time he goes to a different place. It's like every other day.
Yeah, and he does a lot of relocation. And I wanted to talk with him about all the stuff he does, because it seems like the black and white spitters are the most common that he gets relocations on. But it could also be that that's just the one he posts, because it is, he posts venomous stuff a lot of times. So.
Yeah, and he seems like he's an extremely knowledgeable person too. I mean, when he talks about him, he seems to know a lot about it. So he'd be a good person to have a discussion with for sure.
It's hard to. When I made this mangrove pit viper video, and I was asking him some questions about him, and then he asked if we could do one of these chats, but it's hard to get. What's up, TNT Todd? With the difference between here and like Thailand, big time difference.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, because it's like sun up when it's sun down here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he is knowledgeable. But yeah, everyone, I hope you enjoyed talking about Venom. And Darius, thank you so much for joining me again, once again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, are you guys going to train some more today?
We're about done. I think we're going to close some stuff up and make sure everybody's good, to be honest.
All right. Well, yeah, man. Enjoyed talking. We'll do some more stuff together too. But yeah, thanks again, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, everyone. Every single link is in the description, so be sure to go show Darius some love. All right.
Thank you
All
all.
right. Jess, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, thank you for being here. Take care, everyone.
All right.